It's quite important which paints you choose to paint Bondaweb, Wonder Under, Risofix with. You don't want to paint the paint too thickly, and you don't want to use paints that have got latex in that you can use for printing as well. If you do use them sparingly, and be prepared to take a little bit of extra time to take the backing paper off. I tend to use things like acrylic paints that are nice, cheap and easy, but I do like shiny metallic paints. And this one does have a bit of latex in because I also use it for printing as well. So the cheaper paints that you can get into in hardware stores and art shops, probably in the children's section, are absolutely fine for this. You don't need to use textile paints, anything fancy, just plain water-based paints, and acrylics are good. So let me show you how I paint Bondaweb. I use a paintbrush and a water jug with water in, but I also start off with a water squirter. I just use a stain remover one that's very well washed out because they work really well. You can just keep reusing and reusing these water squirters. They're great. They're very useful in your tool cupboard. I cut a piece of Bondaweb the same size as a piece of newspaper, so you can just lift it up and pop it away to dry. And I pin it at the corners, and the Bondaweb is rough side up. Okay, you're painting the rough side, and it's all pinned down so it doesn't curl up. You'll need to do this about at least a day before you need it. I tend to do 10 or 12 sheets at a time, then I've always got something in stock. So to start with, I'm just going to squirt with water, because what you don't want to do is flood. You'll probably hear this but not actually see it. There's water going on. I don't actually want to flood the Bondaweb because obviously the wetter it is, the longer it takes to dry. And I'm just going to, oh, I've got some paint on this from another job earlier. But you can see the paint going into globules where the water is. So what we don't want is puddles of colour. Okay. So you can see my mouse. So we can see what's happening. Now, once you start to work gently with the paintbrush, you don't need to press hard and scuff up the Bondaweb. But can you see that it's starting to ripple in this direction? If you carry on painting in that direction, I think it will be much more successful. I like to keep everything going in the same direction, even when I'm laying the Bondaweb down later when I'm ironing it down. So I'm just going to apply some paint now. Now, as I say, this is the naughty paint that I use. This is a metallic paint, but it is just so shiny and lovely. You can get cheaper versions which don't have latex in. So rather than watering the paint down, I'm using the water on the Bondaweb. So you can control how much paint you put on. Okay, so I think you can see that it's not too thick. I can actually see through to the newspaper that the Bondaweb is on. So I'm not absolutely covering it with thick paint. If you have thick paint, it will look lovely, but it will form a barrier, and then the Bondaweb won't stick, because Bondaweb isn't actually made to be painted. We're actually doing something with it you are not supposed to do. So you have to give it a bit of a chance. So that's all painted, but I could do with a little bit more colour. So I'm just going to add a little bit of blue, but just be careful. You don't want to add tons more colour, just a little bit. Okay? Just a little bit. You don't need tons and tons and tons. I'm just going to liven it up. Now, because this is a plain acrylic with no metallic in it, it's a bit thicker. So I'm just going to water that down a bit. There we go. So you could leave it at the nice pale and interesting stage, or you can add more colour. What you don't want to do is have lots of stripes. As we're making backgrounds to stitch onto, we don't want a stripy background because it's just too distracting. I'm just putting the lid back on my paint because I'm bound to knock it over, and it's a new tub. So always make sure you put the lids back on everything. I'm a nightmare for knocking things over. So can you see that that is now starting to ripple really nicely? It's working really well. You just get the most wonderful effects. And as it starts to dry, it will be more pronounced, the rippling. This is, I mean, Bondaweb is a fantastic product for applique and foiling and for all the normal things, but then you can start to paint it. And then that becomes very exciting. So what are we going to do next?